Imagine you are a highly decorated executive chef who has spent decades perfecting the art of haute cuisine in the most demanding and prestigious kitchens of Paris, London, and New York. You are accustomed to the eccentricities of the ultra-wealthy. You have cooked for demanding celebrities, arrogant politicians, and reclusive billionaires who require their meals prepared with absolute precision. You believe you have seen the absolute limits of human extravagance and entitlement. But nothing in your long career prepares you for the contract you sign with a shadowy shell company managed by Jeffrey Epstein. You are offered a salary that defies logic, and you are flown blind on a private jet to the U.S. Virgin Islands. You are transported by a heavily guarded speedboat through the dark Caribbean waters to Little St. James. You expect to find a tropical paradise, a sun-drenched playground for the global elite. But the moment you step onto the concrete dock, you feel a suffocating atmosphere of total surveillance and unspoken terror. You have been hired to run the kitchen for the masters of the universe, but you will soon discover that the most terrifying secrets of the island are hidden inside your own pantry. The main kitchen of the estate is a marvel of modern culinary engineering. It is a massive, pristine space, gleaming with stainless steel and stocked with the finest equipment money can buy. It is also completely isolated. You are strictly forbidden from leaving the immediate vicinity of the main house. You cannot walk down to the beach, you cannot explore the winding trails, and you are absolutely forbidden from approaching the strange striped temple structure that sits on the highest hill of the island. Security guards with earpieces and cold, dead eyes watch the service doors constantly. You are told you are cooking for some of the most powerful people on the planet, but you rarely ever see them. You only see the orders printed on crisp white paper and delivered by silent handlers. As a master chef, you pride yourself on sourcing the absolute finest ingredients in the world. In your previous restaurants, you demanded to know the specific farm, the exact vintage, the precise geographic origin of every single vegetable, and every cut of meat that entered your kitchen. You built relationships with local butchers and organic farmers. But on this island, the supply chain is a terrifying black box. Deliveries arrive in the dead of night. Heavily armed men unload locked thermal crates from unmarked barges that slip into the cove under the cover of darkness. When you open these crates, you find cuts of meat that are entirely devoid of any labels or branding. There are no stamps from any Department of Agriculture. There are no invoices detailing the origin or the species. You are simply handed a sheet of paper by the estate manager, instructing you to prepare the contents according to highly specific and incredibly strange directions. The paranoia begins to set in, slowly creeping into your mind like a slow-acting poison. You cannot ignore the whispers among the housekeeping staff who scrub the floors and wash the linens. They speak in hushed, terrified tones about the young girls who arrive on the helicopters looking dazed and frightened. They talk about the strange mechanical sounds echoing from the subterranean levels beneath the tennis courts late at night. You try to focus entirely on your craft to block out the reality of your surroundings. You tell yourself you are just a cook, but the cognitive dissonance becomes physically unbearable. You are creating absolute masterpieces of gastronomy, delicate reductions, complex purees, and intricate pastries, while you are fully aware that unspeakable crimes against humanity are happening just a few rooms away. You realize with a sickening dread that you have become a silent accomplice, an enabler, armed with a chef's knife and a whisk, helping to maintain the illusion of civility in a house of absolute horrors. The psychological terror peaks during the preparation for a highly exclusive gathering. It is the peak of the winter season, and the island is swarming with private security. The guest list is completely hidden even from you, which is highly unusual. Normally, you are given dietary restrictions and preferences for specific VIPs. Tonight, you are given nothing but a timeline and a locked thermal box that was flown in separately on the Lolita Express. When the guards finally unlock the crate and leave the kitchen, you look inside. Inside is a type of meat you cannot immediately identify. It does not have the deep red grain of aged beef, the dark hue of venison, or the pale consistency of pork. It is shockingly pale lean and possesses a texture that makes your highly trained hands tremble. The instructions from Epstein himself, delivered via an intermediary, are chillingly precise and completely violate all your culinary instincts. The meat is to be cooked extremely rare, barely seared on the outside. It is to be heavily masked with a specific blend of overpowering spices and strong bitter herbs that you are told to grind fresh. And it is to be served only to the absolute inner circle, a group of 6 unnamed individuals meeting in the private dining room near the temple complex. As you place the meat onto the blazing hot steel of the grill, the smell fills the sterile air of the kitchen. It is a scent that triggers a primal, deep-seated alarm bell in the oldest part of your brain. It does not smell like any animal you have ever prepared in your decades of extensive culinary experience. It smells sweet, metallic, and fundamentally wrong. The hair on your arms stands up, and a cold sweat breaks out across your forehead. You try to rationalize it. You tell yourself it is just an extremely exotic game animal, perhaps an endangered species illegally smuggled in from a remote jungle for a billionaire's sick thrill. You have to tell yourself that lie to keep from dropping your tools and running out the door. Because the alternative, the terrifying internet conspiracy theories about dark elite rituals, adrenochrome, and absolute depravity flash through your mind, refusing to be ignored. You plate the dishes with trembling hands. You look at the dark juices bleeding onto the pristine white porcelain, mingling with the heavy dark spices. You realize that you are completely trapped. If you ask a single question, if you show a moment of hesitation, the men with the earpieces standing right outside the door will deal with you permanently. You are on an island with no jurisdiction and no police. You are entirely at the mercy of the man who owns the sky and the sea around you. You finish the plates and ring the small silver bell. The silent waitstaff enter the kitchen, their faces completely devoid of expression. They load the plates onto heavy silver trays and carry them down the long, dimly lit corridor, disappearing behind heavy, soundproof mahogany doors. You stand completely alone in the gleaming kitchen, gripping the edge of the stainless steel counter until your knuckles turn white. You listen intently, but the heavy doors block out all sound. You cannot hear the clinking of silver or the conversations of the untouchable class. In that profound, agonizing silence, you realize that you have crossed a threshold from which you can never return. You have been compromised not by a blackmail photograph or a hidden video camera, but by your own active participation in their grotesque consumption. By preparing the menu with no names, you have fed the monster. They have intentionally made you the architect of their darkest appetites, forcing you to bridge the gap between their sophisticated, high society facade and their primal, unrestricted savagery. They want you to know, without ever saying the words, that they can consume absolutely anything they desire, and there is no law on earth that can stop them. Long after your exorbitant contract ends and you are finally permitted to return to the mainland, the severe psychological trauma remains permanently etched into your mind. You abandon your lucrative career. You can no longer stand the heat of a commercial kitchen. You cannot look at a piece of raw meat without feeling a violent wave of nausea and panic. You jump at the sound of a private jet flying overhead, imagining the cargo it might be carrying to some other dark corner of the world. You watch the news as the empire finally falls, as the mansions are raided and the flight logs are published. You see the faces of the politicians and the royalty attempting to deny their involvement. But you know the truth. You know that while the world desperately dissects the financial records and the witness testimonies, the most horrifying truth of Little St. James might never be written on any official document or proved in any court of law. It might be buried forever in the ashes of the kitchen incinerator and locked deep within the suppressed memories of the invisible staff who were forced to cater to a hunger that was entirely devoid of humanity. The dinner for the elite, the menu with no names, remains the ultimate terrifying symbol of a ruling class that believes it is fundamentally entitled to consume everything on earth, including the innocents and perhaps the very essence of the vulnerable.